Okie dokie, let me share my screen. Let's share the whole thing. What can go wrong? Right? Okay. So like Mark said, my name is Jorge Duarte. I am Whiskey3JDG, also licensed as Hotel Kilo 3 Juliet Delta Golf back in my home country, Colombia. And I will be talking to you today about software-defined radio, and this will not be a comprehensive presentation. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Bogota. I was previously licensed as Hotel Juliet 3 Juliet Delta Golf in 2014. A little caveat about my country is that all novice amateur radio operators are licensed as HJ, and once they move up to the next level, they get promoted to HK. So we retain the suffix, but we change our prefix. And in 2018, I was licensed here as Kilo India 5 Alpha November Alpha, where I took my technician and general license the same day on a field day on 2018. And a year later, I upgraded to Amateur Extra, where I changed my call sign to a vanity call sign with my initials, Whiskey 3 Juliet Delta Golf. And fun fact, they match my Colombian letters. And that same day, I also took my test in Colombia because we can do that thing online. And I upgraded to advanced. So pretty cool for me. I have a bachelor's in systems engineering from a university in Colombia, Universidad del Bosque. Last year, I graduated from OU with my master's in data science and analytics. And I am currently pursuing a PhD in industrial and systems engineering. And I work for OU. I do research with the NOAA's National Severe Storms Lab. And I do work related to flood prediction and precipitation impact disasters. Okay, but enough about me. So what is this software-defined radio thing that everybody keeps talking about? Well, this apparently is not a new concept. It's been defined, pun intended, for at least 10 years now. And it's basically a radio communication system where functionalities that are traditionally implemented using purpose-specific hardware or that have been hardwired using electronic components are instead fulfilled by multi-purpose hardware like an FPGA, field programmable gate array, or some software running on a computer or an embedded system. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
My mouse pointer? Okay, so basically what this means is, going left to right, we have RF in the atmosphere, and right, you have your computer. So you could compare this to a solid state radio with digital signal processing, right? You have like a completely analog front end or back end, and then it goes through DSP and then it just gives it to you as audio. This is similar in that way in which you have some RF hardware that goes and gets digitized, and then it's just that digital information is just presented to you, or better, to your computer, and that's how you interact with that RF. So what does this look like? Well, even though the diagram is kind of nice, this just basically means that for the RF stuff, you're gonna have some hardware that does RF, and then you're just gonna plug it to your computer, which will do the heavy lifting and all the processing of those digitized signals. So two well-known hardware options are these little dongles that I'm sure many of you have seen. And of course, FPGA-based radios such as the HK3JDG, of which I have one. So as I was saying, you're just completing this flow block diagram with your computer and some dedicated hardware. Your hardware is doing all the digitization of those signals, and then some part of the processing is done there because, for example, the FPGA is really good as doing to do very quick operations on those signals, but then the rest is relayed to your computer. So some common SDR equipment will be these RTL SDR dongles, which have a specific chipset, the RTL2832U, which is both a controller and a tuner chip, which lets you receive signals from around 20 megahertz to 1.7 gigahertz. You can also receive signals from zero point 0.1 to 28 megahertz using a method called direct sampling, where you bypass some of that processing embedded on the chip and you let your CPU do the processing. But that can be a little bit quirky, but it is doable. It's not impossible. And regarding analog to digital conversion resolution, it can sample signals using 8 bits and at 3.2 million samples per second. It advertises that it can do up to 49 decibels of gain. I put a lot of asterisks there because I don't know how much of that is really useful on a system that was not designed for this, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The cool thing about it, it's $20. Other equipments like the, as the AirSpy HF Plus is a software-defined radio receiver system built for amateur radio or with amateur radio in mind. It's an HF receiver. It also receives VHF from 62 to 160 megahertz. As you can see, it has a combination of 18 and 22-bit resolution for sampling. So this means you can get a lot more detail on signals, especially weak signals, and you can sample the spectrum a lot faster. So you're gonna have a lot more, let's say, fidelity on your signal. And it has up to 15 decibel gain for HF and 13 decibel gain for VHF. So you can really amplify those weak signals and receive them. But of course, as you may expect of this, it's a little bit more expensive. And lastly, we have the HKRF1, which is FPGA based. It's also a transmitter, so it's a transceiver, and it can do half duplex transceiving. And which means that you can actually transmit, and in between your transmitting time pulses, you can receive, and it's able to process that. So it's not full duplex. You don't have two dedicated channels, but you can do half duplex. Its transmitting power is really low. It's pretty much around 0.1 watts on average. It varies greatly between the low end, which is 1 megahertz, and the high end, which is 6 gigahertz. Its resolution is not too high. It's 8 bits, but that's more than enough. But the other cool thing is that you can sample the spectrum on a varying sample rate from 2 million samples per second to 20 million samples per second, which gives you a lot of bandwidth. You can look at a lot of bandwidth at the time. So that's what ultimately this gives you. So the dongle will let you sample around 3 megahertz of RF. The AirSpy can let you see 10 megahertz. This HKRF can let you see about 20 megahertz. It has 2-stage amplification, gain controls for receive, and 3-stage for transmit. And it costs around $300. And I'm not gonna, tell you about all the SDR equipment that there is out there, because the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And some of them have funny names related to fruits, like papaya SDR, lime SDR, Fifi SDR, SDR Play, And regarding dongles, there's just too many incarnations of it. People have been hacking the hell out of these things for years. They have built up converters that let you move the lower end of the HF spectrum up, so your dongle thinks it's receiving VHF, but you're actually receiving HF. They have repackaged these with switches that let you move between direct sampling and not, and just like regular IQ sampling. They have come up with a variety of controller and tuner chips that are not necessarily the original RTL chip that gives the name to this type of dongle. And you can find them anywhere from $12 to $80, depending on all the weird new novel changes that they have. AirSpy is a company that makes various models for receivers that are aimed at different specific applications for ham radio. HackerF is basically open hardware. You can actually buy the parts list of this thing and 3D print a board and make it yourself. So there's just alternatives to SDR that fit almost every need. And of course, we can't forget the big players in ham radio, right? Because we have the ICOM 7300, which is the the new kid on the block, or not so new anymore, but it's, let's say, a hot rig that everybody pretty much has heard of. It's an all band, all mode, 100-watt transceiver based on RF direct sampling. Offers real time, high fidelity spectrum stuff. All the SDR magic put in a package that is familiar to us as hams. But of course, it's $1,200, so it's not $20. And we can also hit up Flex for one of their state-of-the-art all-band, all-mode transceivers that are the Rolls Royce of this universe. But yeah, that'll pretty much cost you $5,000, or $4,000 if you don't want the controls in the front and you are comfortable using your computer to control it. But having said that, let's go back to this little $20 dongle, because I think that's what most of you have been exposed to, what most of you have comfortable access to, right? Like, we can all kind of not buy McDonald's for a couple days, and we all have enough money to, get a software-defined radio. So this little dongle is a very interesting piece of hardware because it was created to receive digital terrestrial television signals. Funny enough, not in the US, because the US has a different standard, but the rest of the world apparently has a digital television standard that you can receive this way. And it receives, like I said, from 20 megahertz to 1.7 gigahertz. You can do direct sampling to do HF. It has 8-bit resolution. You can sample around 3 megahertz of bandwidth. It uses a small little antenna connector, which is an MCX, which is kind of quirky, but you can buy the adapters. And again, $20. So how does it work? Well, like I said, you need a computer. My recommendation is something with at least 2 gigabytes of RAM, a processor that has more than one core. But good news is you may already have one of these. I mean, I would be really surprised if you don't. The other cool thing is you can run whatever OS you want, from Windows to Mac to Linux, and it'll work. You just need to download different drivers than you would use if you were to use this to receive television. That's the only, let's say, quirky aspect of it, but those are free, open source, and you can download them anywhere. And you need a software client or a front end to interact with, the tuner and tell it what frequency to go to, what demodulation you want, and all this stuff. And the good news is you can get free software, you can pay for it, you can use it on Windows, Mac, Linux again. There's an endless list of possibilities here. You can code your own, we got you covered. You just tell me what platform you're on and what color scheme you like. I'll find you some software to use. And some other little known fact, you can actually plug it into your phone or tablet. As far as I know, it can only be done in Android, but I may be wrong. And you just need to buy a USB adapter for your phone, plug it in, and boom, you can receive radio signals with your phone. There's free applications that work really well. There's paid applications that work really well too. The only weird thing is you can't really charge your phone while you're using the dongle. So unless you buy a splitter or an adapter, you won't be able to. But again, that may introduce some noise into your signal. So anyway, but it's possible. So what do we get for around $20 worth of software-defined radio? So headline is you can receive signals using your computer. But what does that mean for, let's say, general interest or the rest of the world? Well, you can receive broadcast FM stations. Like I said, you can, if you were in a country where you have digital television, you can watch TV using this. Here you can receive the NOAA weather radio. You can receive broadcast AM stations in, shortwave, middle wave, and long wave. Of course, like I said, you need to do direct sampling or use an op converter. Plus, you may want to get a good antenna, not the little itty bitty one that comes with it. You can receive airband, so you can listen to your local airport. You can listen to aircraft traffic, which is unencrypted. It's out there for people to listen to. And interestingly enough, you can actually map real-time aircraft traffic, because there's this thing called automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, or as many of you may know it as ADSB or ADSB, which works in the 1.09 gigahertz frequency, which is an open standard. It's unencrypted, and it's used for air traffic control. So basically, airplanes that are on the air are just shouting constantly their location, their speed, heading, and who they are, their call sign, their tail number. So that's a fun experiment you can do for $20. You may need to, cut yourself a little antenna that's efficient in that specific frequency. But in my experience, you can even use your 2-meter whip, and you'll pick up some airplanes that are nearby. But okay, so that's fun, but what does this mean for us as amateur radio operators? Basically, we can receive signals using our computer again, but we can receive, for example, VHF, UHF signals, and we can decode, for example, FM traffic on 6 meter, 1.25 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. I have no experience on 1.25 meters, but I know it exists. So if you don't want to buy a 1.25 meter rig, but there's some activity near your area, this is a perfectly, valid way of getting into it. That means you can listen to repeaters or simple communications. You can also listen and decode DMR traffic. This is something I did not know or had not thought of until recently. And so this means you can, access 2-meter or 70 centimeter repeaters that are hooked up to the internet, and you can listen to both time slices. I haven't really seen a way to select which channel, because you're just going to listen to all the traffic on the time slices. But hey, for $20, you go from no DMR listening capabilities to DMR listening capabilities. So not too bad. You could also listen for AM, CW, and SSB traffic on VHF and UHF. I know that is a thing in 6 meters, and some contesting on an operation on 2 meters as well. I have no experience with the 220 megahertz band or 33 centimeters or 23 centimeters, but you can cover those with this $20 dongle. So, hey, maybe this is how we get amateur radio operators into this. I would call them obscure bands, at least for me. But, for $20, you can get there. And of course, maybe more appealing to us is you could listen to HF, CWAM, single sideband FM traffic. But again, you have this caveat that you need to do direct sampling, get an up converter for about $40. You may want to use a better antenna, because as we may know, receiving HF is not as easy with short antennas. And the other cool thing is that you can use your antenna tuner to make reception more efficient. I did not know that. So before we delve any deeper, I will leave you with some words of advice. So regardless of what your OS is, what OS you're using, and what client or front end you're using, there's some things that I encourage you to do if you're gonna experiment with these dongles. And the first one is install the appropriate drivers. I remember starting several years ago with these little dongles, and it took me a week, and I didn't understand why everybody on the internet was just plugging that thing to their computers and doing all this cool stuff, and I was just stuck there, not doing any of the fun stuff. And it's just, you gotta get the right drivers. And Back then, it wasn't too straightforward. Nowadays, um, rtlsdr.org is it's just the best website ever. It tells you what drivers to get, how to install them. It's super easy. But you have to keep in mind that if you want to use direct sampling, so if you want to do HF with your $20 dongle, you may need to be careful and download the special version of your driver that lets you do direct sampling. And for example, if you're on Linux or Mac, you may not be able to download a driver binary, so you may have to compile your drivers yourself, which I know sounds scary, but it doesn't have to be. There's pretty comprehensive instructions out there. Number two is, this may not come to a surprise for anybody, but you might want to get a suitable antenna for the band you want to receive in, right? You may not want to be stuck with a tiny 5-inch little antenna that comes with your dongle. Why? Well, because you want to have gain on the band that you want to listen to, right? Also, you may want to, that provides some attenuation on your broadcast stations, which if you live in Norman, for example, there's a couple of AM stations that can really introduce some noise, especially to a chip that was meant for TV and doesn't really have a great signal rejection built into it. And also, I would encourage using your antenna tuner just to make sure that you have the gain, some more gain in the band that you want to listen to, or you can get some bandpass filters or build them yourself. They're not too difficult to make. And lastly, these things require some digging into. So you may want to figure out what the PPM correction for your dongle is. This means you can adjust, in terms of like a solid state rig, you can calibrate your oscillation to be in sync with the rest of the universe. So you can calibrate your dongle so that you know that when you tune to 10 megahertz, it's actually 10 megahertz, not 10.0.1 or something like that. And there's no easy way out of this one because all dongles are not created equal. They are all different. And even though you may plug in your dongle and tune to 10 megahertz and hear the time and try to tune as best as you can that signal, when your dongle has been on for several hours, it may drift a little bit. So you may want to plug it in, start receiving for, maybe several minutes. And then when it's warm, you may want to figure out where that, what that PPM amount for the correction is. And the second one is, these things are not very well shielded. So if you put it like in the back of your computer where it's near the power supply, you may be getting some stray RF there. So they're very prone to, getting a lot of noise from external sources. But, this is not a huge list of things to do. It's just, a couple things that will make your experience a lot better. And that's about it. This is where my presentation takes kind of like a turn, and I'll do some demonstrations on how to use these little dongles to receive, and I'll also use my HackRF. But before I go any deeper, I would like to know if anybody has any questions that I can answer before I jump into demonstrations.
None in the room. Anybody on Zoom?
Mainly to see the demonstration. And thank you, Jorge.
You're welcome.
Jorge, a couple of questions. On the SDR dongle, the $20 dongle, which computer program do you recommend?
Well, so I am not a Windows user. So I have only used it on Linux and Mac. And for both of them, I have used GQRX. It's a very basic software. But I know that if you're on Windows, you may want to use SDR Sharp, which is SDR, the pound sign, the number sign, or HD SDR, which is also very, very good. I know SDR Sharp was one of the first ones out there, and it just has so much stuff. Like that thing is the Swiss Army knife of little SDR world. You know, and let me just unplug my antenna here. And so, you know, I have also, so just to, as a proof, I can't show you when I plug it in, but I swear that this is what I'm going to use for the demonstration. This is my little dongle. I've had it for, gosh, maybe 5 years now. I've done all sorts of experiments with it. You know, for 20 bucks, it's not bad. You can even get nicer ones now. There's this company called Nuelec. They're based out of New York, and they make ones that are just like tiny, and they have like built-in heat sinks, and they're like shielded. They have SMA antenna connectors, and it's still the same chip, but they've put some of their engineering into it. So, I mean, 5 years ago, this was awesome. Today, I would encourage you to, you know, spend maybe $5 more and get the Nuelec one or something like that, because it may pay off. Any more questions?
Jorge,
Hank, go ahead.
I spent about an hour this morning on the Nuelec website, and that's a very interesting website in New York. They sell a lot of stuff that I might buy tomorrow.
All right. Yeah, they
Nuelec
actually,
is spelled Nooelec. Just go to nuelec.com.
correct.
Jorge, this is Hank Hamner. Can you hear me?
Yes, Hank.
What is the biggest advantage or some of the advantage for an average ham radio operator to even use SDR, especially if you have an SDR radio?
Well, let me, with that question, let me jump back to my presentation and go to my final slides, and we'll get that out of the way. So basically, I think the most common ham SDR application that I have seen, it's basically this. It's you have a radio that it's not already an SDR radio, and you want to be able to see the spectrum as you're, you know, cruising the airwaves. So you want a pan adapter on your computer. And that is what I think the main application is. So of course, without a switch, which is what I'm showing you, you may want to have two different antennas, one for receiving in your SDR and one for transmitting with your rig. But even then, you know, you may get some RF into your SDR and maybe fry it if you're trying to get that DX station and you turn on your linear. So MFJ, or in some other companies, have built these things called a transmit receive switch for SDRs. So what you can do is you can just, you know, plug your antenna out, your radio out, your antenna, and your SDR to the same thing that goes to a single antenna. And you can, and whenever you key up your radio, it just switches out the SDR from the circuit, so that you don't fry it. But when you're not transmitting, you're getting reception on both your radio and the SDR, and that way you can, you know, you don't fry your SDR when you transmit. Also, there's integration between, for example, Ham Radio Deluxe, which I know a lot of people use for cat control and logging and all that stuff. It integrates with HD SDR, so that when you move your VFO, the SDR actually gets tuned as well. So I think that's one of the most common ham radio applications. But also, if you have already have an SDR radio, you may want to experiment with other stuff. So this is one of my personal projects that I've done. That's my little dongle there, and this is a portable internet router or access point that I overrode its software to run an open version of Linux. It's called OpenWRT, which is like meant for routers and network devices. and it's just a little Linux box, and I installed the RTL SDR drivers there, and wrote a little script that whenever this thing turns on, it just listens to, you know, uh, to the radio and serves those as TCP/IP packets over the network, and then I can just, you know, jump on my phone or any of my computers and, you know, connect to it and consume those packets and tell the radio to tune to a specific frequency and control it using another device. So I would suggest, I would say, if you already have an SDR radio or you have some other type of pan adapter, well, you're not going to gain much out of this in terms of ham radio applications, but you may encounter other things like, you know, building little RF servers that you can connect to. Also, like I mentioned before, you could map real air traffic near your house. You could even add that receiver as part of a worldwide initiative to keep track of airplanes and kind of, you know, just leave it running. There's a lot of stuff you could do. I mean, it's just, of course, this is by no means, like, if you wanted a pan adapter, I would suggest you don't start with your $20 dongle. You may want to go with an AirSpy, for example, which was specifically built for this. But if you want to see what you know, what are the things you can do with it, it's a fun little way of getting started, especially in VHF and UHF, where there's virtually nothing weird that you have to do to get started. For example, Mark Klein.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's been very helpful.
Okay. And so, for example, Mark Klein and I collaborated on a device to measure changes in RF noise over time. I don't know, Mark, what's the status on that, but it's an interesting idea, right? You can have these little inexpensive receivers everywhere and record constantly what the noise floor level is, and you can just record that change over time, and now you know.
Jorge,
so, yeah.
One other question I'll ask you: have you messed with the Balun? It's a 1 to 9 Balun add-on board that you can do with those?
I have not.
Okay, I've got one, and I was real surprised in something I just tried for a grin. The standard dipole that we get a lot of times with a FM stereo that, you know, they package with it. I took one of those and just taped it to the windows and hooked up to this 1 to 9 Balun, and I was blown away by what it would do. Because I was, you know, looking at using just my dipole outside, which works great, but, you know, it's only going to be received. I can't use it for transmit then.
Right.
And I have a Kenwood that does not have a waterfall in it. And that was the main reason I wanted to get this, is so I could see the other traffic and not spend a lot of time just spinning a dial.
Yeah, that's a great application. And yeah, the other thing is you can, you know, get to experiment with building equipment as well. I've seen people use these to do radio astronomy as well. They just build these antennas that can listen to the hydrogen band, and they map the Milky Way, because all you do is receive, right? I've seen people use these as passive radar for aircraft as well. They just made 2 antennas and they receive, and then they do Doppler calculations in the phase difference of their signals on their 2 dongles, and they know where things are. So it's an inexpensive way of starting to do very interesting things. Yes, does it have a high bar maybe on when you want to do like passive radar stuff? Probably. But the community is growing. There's a lot of people doing this sort of thing, and you know, I believe in the sharing of knowledge, and I believe this is an open thing, and this is why it's picked up such strength over the years. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I will gladly move to the
I've
demonstration.
I've got a question here. Stand by one.
Yes.
Yeah, do you have any experience with the SDR Play series of units and Linux?
I do not, but I do believe I have seen those drivers are available as part of the Osmocom package. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's really popular on the web SDR front. Those guys use a lot of those.
Obviously, I have to dig. I'm slowly fading away from Windows and moving Linux onto more of my machine, so that could be relevant, I guess.
Well, the best way I would go about this is there is a live Linux CD or DVD image that comes preloaded with like all the SDR stuff. Like you can boot off of that image and plug in any SDR and it'll just work. They're making sure it's updated. So I may have to Google this, but I can come back to you or you can shoot me an email. And I can help you look at this because I know this exists. It's a thing. People wanna, when they buy SDRs and they wanna do Linux, this is the first thing that usually they try because it's like no configuration at all.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Obviously, I'm going to have to do some of my own homework, and thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now, any more questions?
Anybody else here? Okay, nobody else here. How about on the web? Anybody else there?
I also accept critiques. I may also be corrected.
I will say this is that an SDR has been for a lot of folks, and it certainly has been for me, a challenge, especially with the SDR Sharp. If you don't follow it's like a cookbook, step by step, the initiation, you're not going to hear anything.
Don't miss a step.
Yeah, don't miss a step, right. And so I will tell everybody that, my own pitfalls with that is, learn it by rote and make sure that you do it every time the same way, because otherwise it's a trip and frustration more than anything else.
Yep. Yeah.
And
that's why
I will ask
highlighted.
Mark to put your information also in the SCARS newsletter. So if anybody does have a question, they can email you if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. I will always be happy to help with any experience that I can have. And, that's why I'm here. Mark finally convinced me to do this.
His arm's broken. You notice he only shows one arm.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate
Show us your
it.
demo, man.
Yeah, demo. It's
All
that
right.
waterfall that gets me. That's the whole deal, right?
Yeah, one thing is listening to the spectrum, but the other thing is looking at it for sure.
Yep.
Okay, let me get this fired up. And let me get my list of things that I promised I will do because I may have to. Okay.
You also, you and maybe you don't want to get into it, and that's okay, the whole web SDR thing.
Yeah, that's going to be kind of my closing.
Okay. Sorry. Didn't mean to steal your thunder. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, a little.
Okay, so first let's work on my demonstration with the little SDR dongle. So you guys are seeing this black screen.
Come over my house.
So this is a client called SDR Angel.
Tell them that you're.
I've only recently discovered it, so I must excuse myself in advance if I fail catastrophically at this. But it's a really neat client. Let me start it up. But I don't know if you're hearing any of the audio output of this or not.
No.
No.
Whoa.
Okay, sorry. Is it?
Yeah, now, yep.
The name of your tribe is the Porch Indians?
So are you hearing this?
Is that what you said?
Not porch like as in
So
front
this
porch.
is broadcast FM. This is 94.7 The Brew.
I gotta go. My name's John Clay.
FM station
Well,
around
hours
here.
on the radio. Forgive me.
Put it, if you tune it to 1077, you'll see that the digital sideband.
With GiveMeTheVin.com,
I'm trying to lower the volume on this. Oh, there you go.
For your car, they've made it a simple deal.
Is that volume good enough?
That's okay, yeah.
So you wanted me to tune where? Sorry?
107.7.
107.7.
He's going to stop by coming up at
Yeah, there you go.
12:40.
Okay, they've got them turned off. It's not unusual with Tyler, but usually you can see the digital sidebands for their HD signal. That's okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to distract you.
No, it's okay. So the nice thing about SDR Angel is that, you know, their spectrum and waterfall display setup is, I find it rather interesting. It's kind of like that spectrogram look. It's kind of spooky. But it's like, I don't understand half of the controls of this thing. I'll be honest. But it's nice because it lets you do a lot of things that, you know, as amateur radio operators, we're interested in. So like you can adjust the bandwidth of most of your signal reception. You get nice, you know, signal intensity meters and stuff like that, which some of the others don't really allow you to do. So this is a nice piece of software if you're, you know, technically savvy and you want to learn more about these things. So, you know, first demonstration is, yeah, you can listen to your local FM stations using your computer. I have also some airband stuff here. I have the OKC tower, but I don't know how much traffic we have right now. So I'm not expecting us to hear anything. This is the 120 megahertz beacon, I believe. Oh, we have something up here. Something. Come on, you can talk back. Don't be shy.
It's the great thing about a waterfall.
76 Romeo. We're just west of Purcell and down for Wiley Place, west of Quebec.
West of Purcell. Okay, so aircraft. So this is neat. When I tried this yesterday, there was nobody here, and I was kind of bummed that I was not able to show you this. But you know, this is my SDR dongle is actually hooked up to a quarter wave vertical magnetic mount antenna for my HT, and it's on top of an empty can of beans. So
is that critical? Is that it's empty? Is that a critical thing or?
No. I don't think the beans really matter. Oh, well, I don't know. I that's a lie. Beans are high in iron content, so it may boost your signal. So I mean, my gain here is not great, but you know, I can still receive aircraft communicating with the tower, and you can, if you had a, you know, an antenna with enough gain, you could listen to the ground control frequency. All these frequencies are, you know, these are not a secret. Everybody knows them. They're on the internet. You shouldn't transmit on them, but you know, it's neat stuff that you can do with a little $20 SDR dongle. You can listen to aircraft. Now, if you pair it with mapping aircraft in real time, this could get really interesting, right? You could see them on your screen move over your house while you listen to them approach to OKC Airport. I have not tried that in the past because I only have one dongle, so I can either listen to them or map them. And unfortunately, my mapping system died when I upgraded some software on my Linux box. So sorry, I can't show you that. But yeah, I mean, you could think of these sort of things that could be kind of cool. Of course, we can listen to NOAA Weather Radio. If this doesn't let me down. Not picking it up. Okay, well.
That's weird.
Like I said, this is a new software for me, so I may have something.
Oh.
Fitting clothing when possible. To reduce risk during outdoor work, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration recommends scheduling frequent rest breaks in shaded or air-conditioned environments. Anyone overcome by should be moved to a cool and shaded location. Heat stroke is an emergency.
Okay, so
Call 911.
there you go. So if you don't have anything that receives no weather radio, you could definitely use this for that too. You could even use it to plug it into a little server and serve those packets over the internet and have a little Raspberry Pi that triggers whenever it hears the alert sound. I mean, of course, that would be quite the hack, but it's there. You could try. So of course, we could listen to our repeaters as well. So our 2-meter repeaters, our 70-centimeter repeaters. I was having trouble with this, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get this to work. I don't know if anybody can see up the repeater.
Looks like your narrow, isn't it the narrow FM demodulator? Is that a red? Is that a problem with that coder?
No, I think that's just the color. So it's just, I don't know why this configuration is not really working, but you can, oh, I know what it is. Remember about that PPM stuff I told you about? See, I'm off by about 17 megahertz. Could anybody key the repeater again, please? Yeah, so.
Go over to UHF. I'm on there now.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why that's not. Oh, sorry, I forgot. So one little tricky thing, if you change this thing without turning off the dongle, it will. So yeah, it's kind of difficult, and I believe my problem is I have not configured my dongle for the PPM correction. So that's why I'm having to manually tune where the signal is. So I failed at enforcing my recommendation here, but so I mean you can listen to the repeaters as well. You may have to switch between the receive and the transmit frequencies if you want to listen to different parts of that communication or for a signal that's not making it there. But lastly, the other cool thing you could do is you could decode DMR. And I know this one works because I tested it. So maybe somebody could do a parrot test if they have their SDR with them. We may be able to hear them here.
Hello, test 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, there you go. You see? And you can see the constellation plot here, where you can see the modulation, the digital constellation here.
N5
All right. So
the constellation thing is awesome.
Oh yeah, and it's completely undecipherable. It means nothing to us. We can't relate.
Well, it's isn't that QPSK or whatever? Or?
I don't know. Gordon may be able to answer this for us. I think so. Yeah.
That looks like 4.
Looks like
okay,
what?
We've got Peter hyperventilating, so we may want to just tone it down some.
That looks like a 16 quam constellation.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I knew it was one of those doohickeys.
Did you see when the silence was there? It was just like a ring here.
Around one of the poles, yeah.
Yeah.
Or one of the nodes, whatever.
So yeah, I mean, this is pretty neat. This has all been with the little $20 dongle and free software and free OS, free drivers. So as long as you already have a computer, that I believe most of you may already have, for $20 you can jump in on this. I'm guessing you also have antennas, so you may only have to invest in an adapter from that little MCX thing to whatever other adapter you have, you know, a PL259 or BNC.
So what's the name of the software again?
This is called Angel SDR. Sorry, SDR Angel.
SDR Angel. Thank you.
And,
is there a Windows port of that?
I do not know.
SDR Angel.
But you can run Windows. You can run Linux inside Windows. So I'm guessing this should not be a problem.
Oh, I already did. I forgot about that.
And the new version of the Windows subsystem for Linux kernel actually fixes some of the real-time USB issues, if I'm not mistaken. So
I can see that our website is now going to be developing an SDR breakout.
Sure. I mean, sadly, I haven't been able to join for Elmer and I too often, but you know, I'll be glad to always, you know, answer your questions about any of this stuff. I am by no means an expert. This is why this was not a comprehensive presentation.
Forever.
Yeah, hopefully not. So at this point, this is kind of where I will kind of cheat a little bit, because I did not compile my RTL SDR drivers for direct sampling, and my direct sampling capabilities are not very good here, but I do have a HACRF which has HF reception, and I do have a 75-foot long wire antenna strung up out of my apartment. So I that would probably give me better reception here. So let me stop this for a second, and I will share my other window. And okay, let's share this. Okay, so hopefully this won't be too dizzying. I switched software as well. So this is GQRX.
And that does have a Windows port.
No.
No, what?
No. Not that I know of.
That's Linux only.
Well, Mac
no,
too.
And Mac too.
Oh, Mac, well.
Hey.
Same
See,
thing.
The demo gods have smiled upon me because now it's not working. Okay. Let me restart my SDR.
And once you do that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up because we need to get a few other things out of the way.
Yep. Just 1 second, please.
You could do some really cool stuff with a HACRF.
Yeah, I mean,
that sounds like a volunteer to me.
I was able to hijack one of our industrial remote controls with one.
Yeah, if I didn't know better, I've been wanting to try a replay attack on one of those sirens, but I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, there you go.
And this is gonna go live on the internet. Yay!
Yeah.
It's gonna get deported.
You're gonna play Megadeth or Black Sabbath on it.
Yeah, any of those two would work.
I tried to get Mr. Grizzle to play the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
Last weekend, but no go.
Well, he'd be called names if he did it.
Okay, this is
version of Linux
running now.
Does this software run on?
Sorry, let me get the audio down. Can you hear the audio?
I've heard that noise before.
Yes.
Okay.
And the question was, what version of Linux does GQRX run under?
Anything, any variant.
Or Ubuntu or what?
All of them. You can either get it as a .deb package, as an RPM. You can compile it yourself. I'm using a variant of Arch Linux here, so it just compiled. Oh, look at these weird noise over here.
Is there a binary in the various repos? Is there like an Ubuntu?
Yeah, there's an Ubuntu binary
and an RPM for
Red
Hat based.
Yep, it's ready to go.
So the regular software install tools will probably find a pretty close version
and
of it.
if you have a Mac, you can install Homebrew, and you can just do brew install GQRX, and that'll bring everything you need. So, okay, last part of the demonstration, HF. So you are seeing here anything from 10 megahertz to 18 megahertz. This is
that all?
That's, 8 megahertz worth of spectrum right there. So that's what and I could do 20 if I wanted because of the HackerF capabilities. Now, of course, there's compromises. I only have 8-bit ADC, which is the same the little dongle has, but it's not too bad. So let's go to easy listening stuff. So some CW, which is easy to spot here.
Sounds like satellite.
Yeah, so you can see all these guys having QSOs here.
The IARU contest is this weekend, so there should be a lot of stuff on.
Also, if you have Windows and you're using SDR Sharp, you can actually fire up a CW decoder or a read decoder or an FSK decoder that it's built in to SDR Sharp. So pretty cool, right?
Or Whisper.
Or Whisper as well, yeah. So, you have access to doing cool stuff with HF. And I wanted to show you something. Right now, my antenna tuner is
Russia.
It's tuned for the 20-meter band. If I bypass my tuner, you can see all these stray signals coming in. So that's
the noise
something,
floor came up too.
Yeah, so that's something I did not expect. That because as far as I knew, is an antenna tuner just matches the impedance of your antenna and kind of electrically changes your length and other weird things, but it also helps you filter out all that crap. Who would have thought? Probably people who know electronics will be like, yeah, duh, but I did not expect that. So, it's interesting things that you can do, and you can, find out about yourself and experiment. So let's see. Let's go to voice here, and let's see who is here. Oh, I need to go upper sideband. Okay.
And Jorge, I'm going to need to go ahead and close it.
Yep. So you hear these people talking here. Can you all hear it?
Oh boy! So it doesn't filter out silly conversations.
Oh no.
Okay.
No. Sorry, that change will only roll in once we change to an authoritarian government.
You mean Norman City government?
Yes, of course. These are all local.
Again, Jorge, thank you very, very much. Excellent presentation.
No, thank you very much for bearing with me. I wasn't really sure if this is what you guys wanted or needed, so I just kind of stepped back in time when I was really new to this, and I thought, well, what would be cool to see?
Well, as a kid, I started with tubes, and then I went to transistors, and then MOSFETs and ICs, and now I'm seeing dedicated, and my head's hurting, and learning any more EIEIOs is not going to work for me. So, with that, again, thank you so much.
All right, please come to Elmer Night sometime so we can pick your brain more.
Absolutely,
yeah, for sure.
Elmer Night.
For sure. I'll do my best to go next week.
Let's see. Do we have our secretary? There he is, Chris. Anything to report in minutes? Turn your mic on.
Nothing other than what's been published.
All right. Very good. Treasurer.
He wanted me to mention to you that his computer has broken down and he can't get it. Oh, here he is.
Yeah, I'm back. I don't know how long it'll stay back, but the financials are looking good. We have 151 paid members. Last year, this time, we had about 180. So we've still got quite a few people that haven't paid their 2020 dues. I don't know who they are right in front of me, but you know if you're on the call. Financials look pretty good. We still have over $17,000 in the bank, and we have had no expenses to speak of, so there's not really much to report. So if you've got any questions after looking at the financials